Some believe that the flesh and blood of the future generation may not be flesh and blood at all. Some believe that salvation lies not in the soul but in the circuit. Some believe in a future of cybernetic organisms, a future of the cyborg. This rat is just like any other rat, except for one crucial element. It has no free will as to where it moves. In a sense, it's being remote controlled. Developed by scientists at the State University of New York, it's been created to aid the location of bodies in disaster areas too dangerous or too difficult for human rescuers to work in. The theory is in fact quite simple. The pleasure centers of its brain are stimulated to encourage it to move in the correct direction. Crude but effective, this technology has actually been possible for some time. Animal and machine are already working in a simple harmony. But what about us? What does the future hold in its metallic grasp? How will our pleasure and pain senses be stimulated? One man who may have some idea is Professor Kevin Warwick of Reading University. Professor Warwick's been at the cutting edge of robotic and cybernetic research for some time, and he's gained a reputation for putting life on the limb, or to be more specific, putting his research on his limb.
What we're putting together at the moment is an implant that will be positioned on my left arm, connecting onto the nerve fibres in my arm. So we'll have a series of pins that will actually be fired into the nerves. From there, there'll be wires coming out of the body, and by radio the signals will be transmitted off to the computer. Well, the longer term aims are much more exciting for me, the scientific ones, which is really not looking so much at the medical side of repairing something that's gone wrong with people, but taking a person such as myself and saying, can we upgrade? Can we give humans extra capabilities? In my case, it's looking at extrasensory input. If I give myself ultrasonic input, like a bat sense, what will I make of that? What will my brain make of having an extra sense? And maybe after that a seventh sense and an eighth sense, infrared, ultraviolet, all sorts of different things we can look at. I guess for me also is the new possibilities for communication. If I can send signals from my nervous system by radio to the computer, across the internet to another person's nervous system, can we communicate in that way? Ultimately, when we're looking at brain implants, then it's looking at communication from brain to brain via the internet, literally thinking to each other. I think we're looking at a very exciting period as far as what you might call entertainment. Now that opens up all sorts of possibilities. Can we download from the computer games literally into a person's brain? Can you carry out a game? A bit like in the film Existence, where people carried out a game in a virtual game, but it was in their brain. The same is true with feelings. Can you transmit feelings from one person to another across the internet? So if someone is having, let's say they're having sex, those signals can be transmitted to somebody else so that they can get something of those feelings.
Well, as to becoming something like the Borg, I would say that we are already surprisingly like the Borg. Defining group identity already exists. The Catholic identity, the Islamic fundamentalist identity. What I would see in the future is more likely a liberation from this kind of mental enslavement. To a certain extent, this is already happening through the mediation of technology via the internet, where we are discovering common purposes with people in countries all over the world who happen to share particular interests.
Yeah, if thoughts could be transmitted, and that's a lot of work would still have to be done in that area, but they could be recorded, and the memories that triggered the thoughts could also be recorded. But a lot of the information that we have and we have recorded is trivial information. It's how to get to and from work. how to get to and from the bar after work. You'd have to have some sort of filtering system in order to only extract those thoughts that were considered relevant in our thought processes.
With life extension probably comes the need to understand memory and to be able to manipulate and rewrite it consciously as opposed to unconsciously, which is what the brain does at the moment. It might actually be neat to have conscious control over this and be able to externalize your memories and edit them and then reinsert the ones which did not cause distress and keep the ones which give you pleasure.
Yeah, I think if you're talking about adaptation to cyborgs, change will be very gradual. It'll happen over many, many centuries in time. And it'll take the usual form that any change takes. It'll be fear, rejection, interest, and then acceptance of this sort of change.
Certainly for me, it's not a question. I want to be a cyborg, but who else wants to stay in the cyborg? Who else wants to be a human? Big questions for the average person.
The criteria for augmentation are what? The welfare of the individual decided objectively, or the finance behind the situation? This may produce a sense of haves and have-nots if it is the rich who are going to augment themselves, whereas the poor remain unaugmented and live shorter lives.
Man has always been involved in his own evolution. As a species, we have developed tools which allowed us to hunt, better food, better protein, which improved the brain, which has gave us reasoning powers to invent other things. It's a cyclic thing. It goes round and goes round and goes round.
Humankind has a duty to intervene in its own evolution. The reason for this is that we risk our own survival by remaining on one planet. An asteroid came by just last week. The sun might flare up. We have a duty to get out of one particular planet and preferably out of one particular planetary system. The way to do this is quite possibly to adapt ourselves to life on other worlds. Cyborgization is one way in which you can do this, as in Frederik Pohl's novel Man Plus, where an astronaut is cyborged radically to be able to survive on the surface of Mars, and where he finds this a wonderful, transcendent experience, because there he is in the environment for which he has been redesigned.
I think looking at what's called the singularity theory, or computers becoming perhaps more intelligent than humans, to me it's the most important question going. I really see human intelligence as being the key factor that puts us in the driving seat on Earth, and therefore something else, whether it's another creature or whether it's a machine, becoming as intelligent or more intelligent than us, by the standard logic, puts them in the driving seat, potentially. So that's going to give us problems as we defer more to such computers. Something we've got to learn to live with, maybe, but the potential to say, well, rather than stick with humans as they are, to upgrade with cyborgs, I think is tremendous.
Why are we so keen to preserve the human body as it has been for the last several tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years? It lets us down in the end by dying. It develops all sorts of misfortunes during our lives.
The ultimate goal seems to be this augmentation in cybernetics. If we augment into one individual, you won't get this creativity, which is the human creativity. The creativity that has created what we have now in the form of innovation and computers and media and everything else. And from that point, we will either stagnate and remain the same, or we will die off.